All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome sort of to our first lecture of Psych 300W, Experimental Psychology. I'm your lecturer slash instructor for the semester. My name is Christopher Gotti, and this is going to be the primary format that we're going to be covering the class through since this is an online asynchronous course offered at Cal State East Bay. I just want to assure you before we get started this semester that I am not in some distant city or some distant place. I'm actually on campus this semester on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And I do have office hours on Fridays via Zoom, which hopefully will allow you to kind of treat this class as if it were somewhat like an in-person class, but approach the lectures and some of the work that's a part of this class in the asynchronous format that it is, which essentially means you get to watch the videos I'm going to be recording throughout the semester at your leisure, making sure that you keep up with the weekly schedule that we'll talk about later, and giving yourself a chance to do the work that we have at times that work better for you. Again, making sure that you keep up with the multitude of different small assignments that we have as a part of this class, which are all designed to sort of get you to the end product of what this class is all about. Having you get your very first chance to write an entire research article. Now, this is not going to be the final paper that you're writing for your senior thesis. There's going to be some nuances to this that are fundamentally different from what you will do for that senior thesis. The goal of this class is to sort of be a culmination of a lot of the underclass courses that you've taken, like intro and stats and methods, and to bring it together so you can start to get yourself prepared for the big thing that's on the horizon for a lot of you as individual projects to be doing for your senior thesis. What we're going to be doing primarily in this class is giving you all the tools that you need to be able to write a paper that which actually having to go through the process of collecting data and doing an extensive analysis and writing up a super large paper like you will have to do for that senior project that I'm hoping a lot of you are already thinking about and sort of strategizing as we go along through this class. What we're going to be doing in this lecture is just going over some of the basics of the class, giving you a lay of the land of what to expect on different weeks as the class progresses. Hopefully, when we're done going through all of this, I'm going to give you a chance to ask some questions in email or in office hours if you do have them, so you can really feel comfortable with what's on the horizon, even if we aren't necessarily getting right into a ton of work right off the bat. I guess we can start by mentioning that I do have office hours on Fridays from 10 to 12. They're on Zoom. Some of my recordings will be in this medium, but if I have a lot of material to cover, it might be in PowerPoint presentation format instead. Regardless, I have about a half hour-ish lecture every single week. And then if you want to talk with me about anything or you want to review things, you can send me an email and hop into my office hours, or you just set up a time with me to meet at some alternative hour. I'm not trying to force everybody into that 10 to 12 hour. I just want to make sure that I have that carved out. So there's always a spot where I'm available, and that tends to be a time and day that most people have open. So I'd like to have it on those days in case there is something that people want to talk about. The next thing I want to mention before we get too far into this class is I'm pretty sure all of you have already met these requirements, but just to be sure, to take this class, there are a couple prerequisites that we have. First is that you've taken our intro class, which is sort of just a prerequisite to get into the major in general. The second thing that you need to have done is taken a methods class and two stats classes as well. Now, if you've been here at Cal State East Bay, these courses are 200, 100, so stats 100, then stat 10. If you've gone to other schools, the numbers might be different. You've also been here for a long time at Cal State East Bay. You might have those classes listed in a different number, like Psych 2020 or Psych 3090. It all depends on a lot of different things. But more importantly, If you're taking this class, you should have already taken that intro class and the other three prerequisites, because to get through this class, having a lot of that base knowledge from those previous courses is going to be essential to having a chance to be successful here. There probably are a few things that you've had instructors not cover in those classes that I'm expecting you to know for this class. There are probably some things that you might have forgotten a little bit along the way as you progress. That's all anticipated. And I'm hoping that when you run into those moments where you need a little bit of clarification or a chance to review some stuff, you do the work you need to do. Right? You email me, talk about things, look for some stuff in books, and you get yourself up to speed. Because there's an anticipation. There's going to be some gaps, and just doing a little extra work should allow you to kind of catch up with things. But you should also note that if you find yourself in a situation as we're progressing where everything you feel like you just don't know what we're talking about constantly, and things just seem to be impossible for you to tackle, you might want to think about whether or not you got what you needed from some of those previous courses. Probably, if you're struggling with it, it's because you maybe took a class with somebody who didn't cover the right material and it was considered an equivalence to these courses at a different school. But there's also the potential maybe your grade in that class wasn't great, just made it past the threshold of passing, and you know in your heart of hearts that you probably didn't learn what you needed to in that class the first time you took it. Maybe that there's something else where we waived a requirement because you're transferring in and you know you didn't quite get what you needed because of the design of that other course. Find yourself in that situation. I encourage you, talk to somebody as an advisor, talk to me about it, and we'll see if maybe backing out of the class this semester and taking it again in a future semester when you've retaken a class or kind of up to the requirements for a class might be better for you. I would suggest, I guess, anticipate that most of you probably won't find yourself in that situation. Most of you are going to be prepared to do well in this class. But I always want to mention that when talking about the prerequisites for this class, because I fully anticipate that all of you are coming in with slightly different knowledge bases, and having different professors means you've learned slightly different things as you're progressing. Getting yourself to this finish line sometimes requires different amounts of work from person to person. We're looking at what else you need to bring with you into the class. It's not a lot of stuff. Getting a research methods textbook is great. Getting a stats book, if you don't have one, is wonderful because that's going to help a lot as you progress. But there's no specific textbooks that I require for this class. In fact, the only thing that we're going to be using for material in this class is articles that you find and different APA style resources that are available. One of the best resources that we have for APA writing, if you're not familiar with it, is our Purdue Online Writing Lab. For some inexplicable reason, the University of Purdue is willing to do every single year in terms of updating and collaborating and making sure that they are up to date on all of the APA formatting requirements that we have for our written assignments. We'll reference that a little bit later as we go. I'll talk about when that becomes really important. And if you want to, again, buy a textbook about APA formatted writing, there are ones available. But in essence, if you've gotten everything that you needed to out of your previous classes, there's a good chance you won't need a textbook for this course at all. The thing that you will need constant access to for this class is the class website. I'm going to be posting lectures like this on a weekly basis. They're also going to have lots of assignments pop up there on a weekly basis. There'll be a discussion forum that I'll be opening up at different points in time when people want to collaborate with each other. There's a really good chance that there's going to be other things that are made available to you as we progress to try to help ease you through the process of getting that first big paper together that I'm guessing might feel a little intimidating right now. I promise should be manageable as we progress if you stay on top of things throughout the entire semester. All right, let's slide down this file. We'll talk about some other things that are important to note. One is, as I mentioned, that this class is all about getting you ready for that research paper, which means this is considered a writing intensive course. When there's a writing intensive course that you take at Cal State East Bay, there are lots of goals that the school has in mind when you're taking these classes. There's lots of different written components to these. There's an attempt to try to dissect and understand outside information and to take into account different ideas, different considerations when assessing something that you've done. We'll go into this much more as you progress, but it's important to note that if you're taking this class, there are lots of stipulations about taking this class that Cal State East Bay places on us as instructors. We really have a set number of expectations placed on us as teachers that we want all students to accomplish so we can get the most out of these classes and accomplish what these classes are designed to do. So how are we going to get to that final paper that we talked about? As I mentioned before, there's going to be lots of different assignments that sort of build up to this final paper. We're going to be doing a lit review right in the beginning of the semester where you brainstorm an idea, either alone or with up to two other individuals. And you start to find resources on this topic. And I know some of you have already done this in previous classes. Others, this might be the very first time you're going through the library resources and finding stuff on the topics that you're interested in. But regardless of how much background exposure you have to this, we're going to be doing these lit reviews in the beginning of the class so you can start to think about an idea that you might want to explore, and not only in this class, but for that senior thesis that you are also considering as we progress. Once you've done that lit review, we're going to start working on project proposals. We're going to do this in the format that you'll have to do it in as you get into that senior thesis. Specifically, we're going to talk about how to apply through the IRB program at Cal State East Bay. We're going to have you write up an IRB application, and you're going to do something else that's critical to getting approval for these projects. It's something called city training, which is in essence basic training on ethical research. I know some of you have had classes where you've already gotten this city training requirement taken care of. Which means for Psych 200, there's a good chance that you've got this requirement taken care of already. If you haven't, no sweat. We'll walk through how to do that, what's required. And this will ensure that when you get to that senior thesis, you've already got this specific requirement checked off. After we do that, we'll come up with a plan. I'm going to email either you or the group that you're a part of a set of data. This is going to be entirely made up data. This helps us expedite the process of running these studies. We don't have to actually run the studies themselves to accumulate information. You're just going to be given that information. What you're going to be expected to do at this juncture is be able to analyze the data and make sense of the results that you're finding. This is a really, really critical juncture within the class. Don't have much exposure to statistics, if you're not sure how to present this stuff in APA format, this is the section that can maybe make you tear your hair out. It's critical when we get to this sound understanding of data analysis, or at least you know how to locate resources that can help you through this process. Having a kind of collection of data with no idea how to analyze it is a researcher's worst nightmare. Because when you get to that point, all you can do is really just hope against hope that somebody can help you if you're not able to analyze this data on your own. It can often lead to faulty conclusions and lots of people picking apart your research, thinking that you were maybe being unethical, when in reality, maybe it's just you need to bone up on your statistical understanding. Find yourself in this situation where you are desperately in need of help. This is, again, one of ththose junctures. Think about, do I need to take another stats class? Help. What do I need to do? It's a question that you should be asking yourself. Regardless of where you find yourself at this point, expectation will be for everybody to take a data set that I give them and to analyze it. to use it for their paper, which means the data sets will all be unique to you or the group that you're a part of, because it's going to pertain to the topic that you decided to study based on what you give to me in your project proposals and your literature reviews that you run. After you've done this, next big step for this paper, or this is, I guess, class, is to write a paper. You're going to first start by coming up with the skeleton of how you're going to set up the paper, and then you're going to transition from that into a rough draft, and from a rough draft into a final product. This all will get done hopefully by the end of the semester. So you have a really good working paper in front of you by the time you're done, and something that you could maybe even model your dissertation off of if you've really done your work in this specific class. In terms of how the points are going to be allocated in this course, you can see right in front of you that there's going to be a pretty even distribution throughout the semester of points that you're going to be accumulating. So be a little bit more weight on that final paper near the end, specifically the rough draft that you write, which is going to require a lot of input from other resources and a lot of tweaking and fine tuning so you make sure that you're presenting stuff correctly. It's going to have a little bit more weight than everything else, but overall, you're going to be earning a lot of points throughout the semester by just keeping up with all the different elements of this class. By the end of the class, you'll earn enough of these 200 points that are possible in the class to get a really good grade. And in terms of grades that I'm going to be distributing in this class, it's going to be entirely based off of percentage of points earned. I'm not going to be doing any rounding. I'm not going to be doing any curving where certain people get right next to a threshold and I figure, well, not enough people got this grade or too many people got this grade, so I'm going to move you in this way or another. It's entirely based off of the 200 points you earned, with no silly extra credit stuff for other things thrown in at the end to have scores that are misrepresentative of what you've accomplished within the class. I want to make sure that if you get an A in the class, you've earned that A and that it shows you're ready to do that senior thesis. The C in the class, I want that to represent that you've sort of done what you need to do. There's some work to go. Below that, that's when we start getting into the trouble areas. I understand the gist of how grades work, but I just want to point out this class requires work throughout. Grade, I'm hoping, is representative of how prepared you're going to be for that senior thesis that this class is designed to prepare you for. Now, if you look further down this syllabus that's on the class website, you'll see a lot of other information that's available. Some of this stuff I'm sure we need to cover in this first presentation. There's two other things I want to focus on beyond just how you're going to be graded in class. The first thing I want to focus on is kind of unique. This is not necessarily something that was a huge issue in previous years, but in the last couple of years, as AI technology has gotten better, this particular thing of academic honesty has become really big issue. Unfortunately, many faculty members over the past few years have had to fail a number of students because they've used resources that they thought, at least, or they thought were perfectly fine, when in reality, they are things that create plagiarism issues that we have to act on. If you're writing these papers in the class, you're doing these different projects in the class, my expectation is, and the expectation of every person teaching this class is, the work that you're submitting is your own. They're not things that are pushed out by an AI bot. They're not things that are edited by a program like Grammarly, so the phrasing that you came up with is completely transformed. This is stuff that you yourself wrote. And nowadays, when you're submitting these assignments online on the class website, Canvas in particular, we are going to be checking for these plagiarism issues. And I promise you, if you have Grammarly write, or you have Grammarly rewrite your paper for you, it will be caught by these programs that are part of Canvas. If you just enter some instructions into a Grammarly program or to ChatGPT or something else, and it writes it for you, it's going to be caught every single time. And I don't want this to be something that hangs over your head as you're working your way towards graduation. As you progress through this class, I want to make sure that you understand that every single component of this class needs to be something that you yourself are writing. Yes, you can work in groups on these topics. So sometimes you might divvy up certain components to this across the people within your group. But everything needs to be unique and it needs to be from the people submitting the information. This might feel like I'm kind of beating on this topic a little too much, but because it's been such a big issue over the last few years, I think it's really important to kind of pause and highlight that before we move on in the class in future weeks. Another thing that I think is really important to note before we finish up today is that every single topic that we're going to be covering throughout the semester is already planned out. There's going to be specific videos I'm going to be creating as we progress. There's going to be other resources I'm going to be making available as we progress. But each week, the expectation is that even though you can work on stuff in your own time, that you're going through each week and finishing at the expected due dates. For example, this Friday, gone through the class policies and goals. There's nothing that's necessarily that you have to submit. I'm hoping after we've covered this, you've already started brainstorming some ideas or projects that you might want to run. Maybe you've reached out to a couple of classmates and talked about potential for getting together if you do want to work on these things as a group. There's again cap of 3 people in a group. So you can only work with 2 other people if you do want to do that, but there's no requirement whatsoever if you want to work alone for you to have to pair up with people. You are more than welcome to work on your own as you progress through the class. And I tend to find, honestly, that those that do work alone tend to be the most successful within this class. Next week, by next Friday, you and your group, after we go through the presentation, should have a list of articles that you come up with that you are going to not only be going over, but kind of trying to break down. Following week, we're going to talk about how to researcher. And then after you're done with that video, kind of understanding how to break down articles, we're going to have you revisit those articles that you found and try to come up with comprehensive summaries of them. These things that you see listed here are going to be populated on the assignments tab as we progress, just so we can kind of expose ourselves to these things in a progressive order, not get too far ahead of ourselves, not get too far behind. Just make sure that everybody's on the same page as we advance. If you look at this schedule, what you'll see is after week 3, which every single week something is due. If you're working through it, you should be fine. Right? It's not that there's a ton of stuff due every single week. You start falling behind, this can snowball fast. This can really start to build on itself and become a big problem. I encourage you to make sure you've carved out some time within each week for this class. Even though this is asynchronous online, there are needs to kind of keep up with this in order to stay on top of all the different components to the class. Each week we'll go over these things in videos so I can hopefully explain them more. But if you've got questions about any of these topics already, don't hesitate to email. Don't hesitate to stop in office hours. Happy to talk with you then as we progress. Again, there's some other stuff that I would love for you to read over on the syllabus. I'm not sure covering them in the first lecture makes a ton of sense. But I hope that what we've been able to cover here in this first lecture makes you all feel a little bit more grounded. If you do have questions, like I've said a couple times during the presentation, please do email me. My email is listed here. I also have a Cal State eSpay email as well. Just usually use my Gmail account anyway if it goes to my Cal State eSpay account, so I just list my Gmail one there. And if you do want to stop in on office hours, anytime between 10 and 12 on Fridays, please email me a time that you would like to stop in on. That way I'll make sure that I can carve out that spot for you, have it reserved so nobody else is dropping in, and we can talk during the kind of allotted time to make sure that I'm giving you my full attention and giving you everything that you need in order to be able to get started on the right foot for this class. Outside of that, not a lot else to cover. So welcome again to the class. Please do reach out to me or any classmates as we get started here. I hope to see you all next week when we get into collecting resources for those research projects that we're going to be doing. Take care, everybody.